Well, I feel like my Mardi Gras wishes were came true. A little bit of Mardi Gras magic happened for me today, and it happened for every LSU football fan today. And if you know the news of the day, and if you know me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I want to get into that, plus so much more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, you can find us on YouTube as well. So you can listen on the go on your preferred podcast platform. You can also check us out on YouTube. So interact, comment, subscribe, Locked on LSU on YouTube. Of course, Locked on LSU, we are part of the Locked on Network, your team every single day. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every day. You can find me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton1, and I appreciate you for being here and for making Locked on LSU your first listen every single day. A very, very happy Mardi Gras to everybody. I hope that everyone had a fun and safe weekend wherever you were celebrating. Hope you enjoyed it. But I got a little extra pep in my step today, and it's not from the king cake slices, multiple that I've had today. It's not the sugar rush coming from that. I am having a pep in my step, and the sun is shining just a little bit brighter because what I have been asking for since September of 2022 finally came to fruition today. And it was posed in the most politically correct and kind way that it could ever be put when it was announced today that Brian Polian will be transitioning into a full-time off the field role. Essentially, Brian Polian has been stripped of his special teams duties, and finally, we can move forward with an at least competent special teams unit. Now, what Brian Polian's role is moving forward, I do want to get into because I think it's very interesting, and I think that that's a role that suits him very well. And I say this, I don't mean anything negative against Brian Polian or the person that he is or what he's done for LSU in an off the field capacity, recruiting, whether that's, going house to house via the transfer portal or the kids in high school on the recruiting trail. He's done a lot of good in the Brian Kelly era so far in that role. And that's what I want to get into coming up next. I want to focus solely on his special teams role now because I saw that he was taken away in an on the field role, and good. He did nothing last year to earn a second crack at it. Not every coach is perfect. Not every offensive coordinator is going to call plays every single game, every single down, every single snap that you agree with. A lot of times coaches maybe have down years or bad play calls, bad games. They're given grace, opportunities to redeem themselves. Brian Polian had so many opportunities to redeem himself last year, 14 of them to be exact. Yet he didn't. It was bad from game one, and it was bad all the way through the SEC championship. It was poor coaching all the way around. It was poor personnel management. He was a poor tactician all the way around. LSU special teams were atrocious. You know it. I know it. It started against Florida State, which was probably the worst special teams performance that I have ever seen in my entire life from any football team ever. And I know that sounds dramatic. You muff 2 punts and you get a blocked extra point and a blocked field goal. Well, that was the difference in the game right there. You at least make the one field goal and you could still muff 2 punts and you still win that game, but you couldn't do that. I mean, every single time LSU, just in that game alone, tried to scratch and claw its way back into the game and to at least take it to overtime to at least make the game interesting. And special teams was like, no, 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 no. We don't feel like winning this game today. Think about how different we would be looking at that LSU team, really at the start of the season, and all the way through the end of the season up until you beat Alabama. At that point, you would have had one loss on your schedule. You could have been saying, well, dang. We beat A&M, which they didn't, I understand. But you beat A&M, and you're a college football playoff team. We would have looked at this team so much differently than we did if special teams just at least did their job once against Florida State. And, you look at Tennessee, muffed kickoff. And Tennessee had one of the top, if not the top offenses, I believe, at the time when LSU played Tennessee. And you just handed Tennessee an opportunity right there deep in your own territory to start the game. So you basically started the Tennessee game, a game against a team that was just flat out had an incredibly better offense than you, a team that looked so good that day. You handed them 7 points right off the bat. You said, no, we want to make this hard on ourselves. So we're going to give you a free touchdown, and then we're going to struggle to get points on the board for the rest of the day. And I don't want to act like special teams was the difference in the game that day. It wasn't. I mean, LSU got blown out against Tennessee. But, I mean, I don't know if that game would have gone any differently if the crowd wasn't completely silenced in the very first second of the game. I go back to what Brian Kelly said, and this was in his Monday press conference after the Tennessee game. He was asked several questions about special teams, rightfully so, because at that point, we already went through the Florida State debacle. We went through so many games where it was just like dumb mistakes on special teams, blocks in the back on kickoff or punt returns, whatever it would be. At that point, we were all catching on to the fact that this special teams unit just wasn't very good. So this was Brian Kelly being asked very, very fair questions from the local Baton Rouge media about special teams. And this was specifically about the Tennessee game. This was Brian Kelly.
Special teams, and just kind of picking up on your drift here, is that a lot of it is execution, but special teams seems to be something different each week. Going back to my first question, is it still just a learning process of who can do what and their ability to execute what they're asked to do on special teams, or in your review, has there been a larger issue that kind of seems to be repeating itself?
Well, look, I mean, the areas that are pretty clear, you watch the game, right? I mean, we got to field the football and we got to tackle in space. Those are, clearly areas that we have to be able to, get guys to perform at that level. And so do we need to spend more time individually on things? Do we need to demand more from the individuals that are actually out there? There isn't like a whole group of other guys that are ready to play. I mean, we're playing front line. We got our starting linebackers on our punt routine, and we've got one of our best receivers returning, kickoff. So it's not like, we've got the JV team out there. These are our best guys, and we just have to stick with it and work at getting better.
And they got better today, because there is going to be new leadership on the special teams unit. And there was one point there that just makes me laugh, like it makes me giggle. Brian Kelly is saying, we need to be able to field the football. Yes, you do. That is the minimum expectation, is to be able to field the football. And that was the point right there that Brian Kelly pointed out. Look, we're not putting scrubs out there. We're not putting guys that have never played a down of college football in their lives out there. Like, these are some of our top players. Against Florida State, Malik Neighbors muffed 2 punts. And it was very obvious that he didn't belong on a kick or punt return team. But then Malik Neighbors emerges as your top receiver on the season. He's a 1,000-yard receiver. I don't think that he just all of a sudden after the Florida State game became your top wide receiver threat. I don't think all of a sudden just after the Florida State game, he all of a sudden just learned how to catch a football. It's poor coaching. I always say, and I reiterate something that a former general manager in the NFL told me. He said, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And there are a lot of repeated mistakes that we saw from this team all season long, where special teams unit looked confused, not prepared, not ready. So it wasn't being coached. It was allowed to happen. And that's why Brian Polian ultimately will not be an on-the-field coach next season. And the next special teams coordinator is going to inherit a pretty solid unit. He's inheriting your punter and Jay Bramblett. He's inheriting your kicker and Damian Ramos. He wasn't the problem. Neither was Jay Bramblett. Your punting and kicking team wasn't the problem this past season. You're inheriting a long snapper and Slade Roy, who was, again, not the problem this season. It was the management of personnel, and that ultimately falls on the coach. LSU had the 116th ranked kick return defense in college football. That is at the bottom of college football. They allowed an average of 23 yards on kick returns. Unacceptable. LSU is ranked 108th in punt return defense. So punt return and kick return. 108th. They allowed 11 yards per punt return. Add in the muffed punts. Add in the blocked kicks. This special teams unit hurt this team. This special teams unit held this team back. And now you go in and that's one of the add that question to the list of offseason questions that I have for this team. Who is going to make this special teams unit better? Because the bar is pretty low. But what I want to get into coming up next is the new role that Brian Polian is going to be filling into, and how I think that might be sending shockwaves throughout the rest of college football. I want to get into that coming up next. But before I do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar, because we are getting into the post-Mardi Gras diet. Maybe you're giving up candy bars for Lent, and you love candy bars. Well, with Built Bar, you can indulge in a candy bar-like treat, but you don't have to compromise your macros. You don't have to compromise your diet. Because with Built Bar, if you want to eat healthier and you don't want to compromise taste, they have the perfect things for you. They're healthy and actually tasty. They're tasty because they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Who doesn't love real chocolate? And they also come in flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, which is my personal favorite. I love that one. Also coconut almond, so delicious. Plus, they're good for you. And I don't really know how they do it, how they make them taste so good, but they're only 130 calories and they only have 4 grams of sugar and they have 17 grams of protein in them. So they'll keep you fueled throughout the day. They'll keep you full for hours. And now the best part about it is you don't have to wait around to get a box. Because for years, we've been telling you about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, which you still can do that. But if you want to go into Walmart and grab some Built Bars, head to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream. Love that one too. Double chocolate or the coconut puffs. Or you can go to Sam's Club if that's more convenient for you. You can run in, grab a 13-bar box with brownie batter and churro flavors. So good. So delicious. Perfect if you're giving up sweets for Lent. You can thank me later. Well, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. But you can also check out Locked On College Basketball. It's Locked On's brand new podcast. It's got everything that you need to know about college basketball all in one place. They've got big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. It's a one-stop shop for college basketball. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So Brian Polian transitioning into an off-the-field role per LSU football, which is just a really nice way of saying he's relieved of his special teams duties because he's needed elsewhere. He has the traits that suit an off-the-field role much better than they do an on-the-field role. So what is that role exactly? Well, Brian Polian is going to be filling in a role that's kind of serves as like a traditional NFL general manager. Or if you look at the traditional coach and GM structure, of course it varies by franchise. If you're a Saints fan, you know that the relationship and the division of power between Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton, ultimately those lines got blurred. Sean Payton was getting more say in contracts and player acquisitions. We don't need to get into all that. But for the most part, the NFL GM and coach relationship is the GM handles business matters, contracts, free agents, drafts, scouting, things like that, the business side of things. The coach focuses on coaching. The coach focuses on a game plan. The coach focuses on which players are going to give my team the best opportunity to win and what tools do I need to give them to do that. So as we look at the change in the landscape of college football and how it's starting to resemble the NFL more and more and more now that players can make money, now that you're not just recruiting from the months of, let's say, December through March. Now that recruiting is a 24/7 ordeal, and it's not just kids in high school, it's kids around college football who are in the transfer portal, it's your own players within your locker room. That's a lot of responsibility on one person. That is a whole lot to focus on for a head football coach. So, as college football starts to resemble and the NFL a little bit more, well, your staff needs to resemble NFL staffs a little bit more, not just coaching staffs, but front office staffs as well. So that's kind of the role that Brian Polian is filling into, is the GM-esque role of NIL deals, of recruiting, of scouting players, of doing the more administrative things, or maybe the more off the field things, because he's been a fabulous recruiter for LSU so far. High school kids in the transfer portal. I mean, I think there's a reason why, beyond Brian Kelly and beyond the recruiting staff that Brian Kelly has put together, a big part of that has been Brian Polian. Of recruiting kids in the transfer portal, recruiting kids in high school. So I think that that's a role that suits him a lot better, obviously, because I don't think that the role on the field suited him at all. But I think that that's going to be a good thing for two reasons, because Brian Polian's good at it. He's proven that. You have the number one transfer portal class in the country. You have a top 10 recruiting class in the country. And Malik Neighbors. I'm looking at my notes right now, looking at Malik Neighbors. We'll get into that. And Brian Polian had a big part of that. So that's, now that he can focus on that in a full-time capacity and continue doing that for LSU, I think is a good thing. And the other good thing is now Brian Kelly can focus on coaching. Now Brian Kelly can focus on finding a new special teams coordinator that's going to help this team. And now that Brian Polian is focusing on that in a full-time capacity, maybe that's some weight that's lifted off of Brian Kelly's shoulders and placed onto Brian Polian's shoulders in this new role. I think that's overall a good thing. I also think, I was on Tiger Rag Radio tonight, and I was asked, doesn't this just seem like a made-up role to give your buddy just so he has a job? And I think that's a totally fair critique. And it might be something that you're thinking about too. Like, oh, well, your old pal from Notre Dame wasn't good as a coach, so you just go ahead and give him a front office role. Totally fair critique. But I think that's the way that all of college football is going to follow suit. I do think that you're going to start to see more GM type of roles be allocated throughout college football, because I think college coaches are starting to realize just how much is on their plates and they need help. So I get it. I understand the fair critique of, this is your buddy. This is the guy that you brought over from Notre Dame. But I do think that this is a necessary role in college football, and it's a role that suits Brian Polian. I also do have to give Brian Kelly a little bit of credit, because it's really hard to mix business and friendship. And it could be really easy for Brian Kelly to defend his pal and say, we're going to give him another shot, so on and so forth. This is my friend, whatever. He didn't do that. He looked at the special teams unit, and he looked at the production from special teams. Again, 116th in kickoff return defense, 108th in punt return defense, and all of college football. That's not good enough. You're not going to win championships kicking yourself in the foot in special teams like that. So I think I do have to give Brian Kelly credit for looking in the mirror and saying, this special teams unit just isn't good enough. And I don't care if you're my pal. I don't care if you're my enemy. We're moving forward with what's going to give this football team the best opportunity to win. Maybe next, this was just a newsy little day. More bad news from LSU football, and how doing dumb stuff that can hurt the team may ultimately hurt this football team come fall. And I'll explain that coming up next. So it was announced on Tuesday that Malik Neighbors was arrested on Monday night in the French Quarter in New Orleans for illegal possession of a weapon. It didn't explicitly say illegal possession of a firearm, but all of the descriptions, it was illegal possession of a firearm. You can conceal carry in the state of Louisiana. Malik Neighbors did not have the appropriate permits to be able to do that, especially when you're on large crowds like he was in the French Quarter on Bourbon, on Lundi Gras. Like it's packed and probably drinking. I don't know if Malik Neighbors was or was not, but let's be smart here. And you cannot be carrying a gun around if you don't have a permit, one, and if you've been drinking too. So he was arrested on Monday night around 7:30, 8 o'clock. He was booked early Tuesday morning. He did not post bail, but he did leave on his own recognizance. And I elicited the help of a lawyer friend of mine, and he said that it doesn't help you or hurt you within the legal process. It could just be used as, hey, look, I spent a little bit of time here. I served my time. I'm good. I'm not giving you any money. I don't know what the situation was. That was just my lawyer friend's interpretation of the situation. We've had no official statement come out from LSU, at least at the time that I'm recording this podcast. No official statement yet from LSU. But I can only expect that there will be repercussions for Malik Neighbors. And my question is, what is that going to be? Are you going to be suspended a game? Are you going to be suspended multiple games? Are you going to be out the first game of the season? Are you going to be suspended for a few weeks of spring practice? Are you at the spring game? I don't know. I don't know what that's. I don't know. That's Brian Kelly's decision and the coaching staff decision ultimately of how they want to handle this with Malik Neighbors. I don't know the entire situation. I don't know how guilty or culpable or malicious this was. I don't want to assume that it was malicious. I don't think that that's the kind of the person that Malik Neighbors is. So I'm sure that Brian Kelly and the staff and Scott Woodward are going to look at the information at hand and say, this is the appropriate repercussions moving forward. But this is kind of a classic case of don't do dumb stuff that hurts the team. That applies on the field and it applies off the field. Don't commit dumb penalties on the field that hurt the team. Know your assignments and don't make dumb mistakes on the field that hurt the team. But also, don't be doing stuff like this. Don't be going out on Bourbon Street with a gun in your pocket and get arrested. It's dumb stuff that inevitably will hurt the team. One, it's a distraction. And two, if Malik Neighbors does get suspended, let's say, first week of the season, well, you've got a really tough test the first week of the season against a Florida State team that is getting all the love in the world in this offseason. And you need your leading receiver. That's one of my biggest question marks going into spring football is it's Malik Neighbors 1A. Who's his 1B? Malik Neighbors 1. Who is 2? You need your number one guy if you want to compete against a team like Florida State that's poised to be, preseason top 10 team in the country. So it's disappointing to hear that about Malik Neighbors. Again, I don't know what happened. I think Malik Neighbors is a good kid. I have no reason to believe that he had any bad intent, just a lapse in judgment. You got caught doing something that you weren't supposed to do. And I hope it doesn't ultimately come back and hurt the football team. But very little information out about this. He has, like I said, he has been released. He'll be in court on Tuesday, I believe, either Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. So we'll get a little bit more information as more information becomes available. That was per the sheriff's office. So we'll continue to get information on that. We'll continue to get information from within the football program about what this means. Maybe they don't do anything about it. Honestly, I don't know. I truly don't know. All I can hope is it gets settled, it gets behind him, you learn a lesson, and you can move forward, and it ultimately doesn't hurt the football team. That's the best case scenario, in my opinion. But, just kind of stinks to hear about Malik Neighbors. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Tomorrow is a Mailbag Wednesday, so make sure to get those questions in. You can comment them below on the YouTube page. You can send me a DM on Twitter at LockedOnLSU or at CarolineFenton1. You can just go ahead and tweet them. However you want to get those questions in, I'm more than happy to accept them. So we'll get to those on tomorrow's Mailbag Wednesday. So for your second listen today, I want you to check out the brand new podcast. It's called Locked On College Basketball. You've got experts Isaac Shaden, Andy Patton, who are both wonderful. They're insightful. They bring you everything that you need to know on and off the court. Plus, they've got big name experts on the show, coaches, players, and so many more insiders throughout the college basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.